There it is. My Licorice is Alive with Miles Davis's 4. There's a classic tune. Got its premiere in 1954 on the album The Miles Davis Quartet, which featured some of the heaviest hitters of the hard bop era. I'm talking about Art Blakey. I'm talking about Miles. I'm talking about Percy Heath on bass and the inimitable Horace Silver on piano, all of whom were single giant leaders in their own right. And really all the great jazz instrumentalists of the hard bop era and beyond covered 4. Sonny Rollins, Chet Baker did it, Joe Henderson. But for me, my favorite version was offered up by none other than Stan Getz on the album West Coast Jazz. His tone, Stan's tone, is so lyrical and persistent, so fluid. For me, musically speaking, that's the gold standard. Stan Getz, his 4. As for Miles, 4, where does it sit? In his repertoire, it really lives, for my mind, at the center of the Miles Davis repertoire. It's kind of a bridge tune from, you had the early bebop days, and then you had the hard bop days. To me, it's kind of a bridge from the hard bop era to the birth of the cool, which came afterwards. And to be sure, Miles Davis was the essence of cool. He was cool incarnate. His very person embodied the meaning of cool, so much so that he really became a kind of cultural symbol for the hip and the happening and the now. Wherever Miles was where it was at. Musically speaking, he was a master of understatement and musical efficiency. As for the tune 4, it's sublime in its simplicity, and it really offers the skilled improviser a cool melody or head, and then a really glorious canvas to create, to improvise on. So for any jazz instrumentalist, 4 is a must-have tune to have in your bag. And also, a few years later, it also got a cool lyric that was added. Of the wonderful things that you get out of life, there are 4, and they may not be many, but nobody needs any more. Of the many facts making the list of life, truth takes the lead, and to relax knowing the gist of life, it's truth you need. And on it goes. That's the lyric to the first 16 bars. So check that out if you can find it. It's around. 4. Cool tune. I played it. Hope you dug it. One further note about Miles, and I can say this. It's a personal note. This isn't name dropping. It's true, but I am proud to say that not long before Miles passed onto the other side and joined all the other jazz giants, I actually opened for him. No, not with my Licorice, but as a merchant of mirth. And by that I mean a comedian. It was at then known as the Palace on Vine Street in the Wood of the Holly. And actually, truth be told, they knew that Miles was going to be late, as he often is, for his gigs. So they needed a sacrificial lamb to kill time before the legend arrived. And that was me. Tough gig, but what the hell, I did it. And it looks good on the resume. And it was also the only time, I think, in my life that I actually saw Miles perform live. At that time, he was in like his acid jazz era. He was kind of like very electric, and it was, not his most glorious period musically speaking, but there he was, and it was a pleasure to be there. So, and it's a pleasure to be here. So welcome to Rebel Without Applause, episode 10, season 2. Those episodes keep piling on. Those weeks keep coming at me. I never really know what I'm going to say until the last minute, and then I scribble some thoughts, and here they are. So, as always, I'm coming to you live right here from the Wood of the Holly in the enchanted land of La. I'm breaking it down jazz-wise, joke-wise, culture-wise, and soon again, Shakespeare-wise. What other things of interest? Yesterday was my birthday. So I'm now smack dab in the middle of my birthday week. And I was thinking, maybe instead of birthdays, we should celebrate Conception Day. Back it off 9 months and start from there. Because, if you think getting into Harvard is hard, try being a sperm. Actually, I have to say, as of today, That metaphor is a bit strained because of the entrance exam, SAT, athletic scholarship scandal scam that just broke in the news. But anyway, for the purposes of my podcast and my slap at irony, try being a lonely spermatozoa, a microscopic flagellant swimming madly upstream, one of millions similarly obsessed triathletes trying to make it to the big mother egg. Talk about long odds, my God! Just every person that walks the earth is really he's a walking trophy for some lucky sperm, some obsessed and very determined little microscopic athlete who made it to the big mother egg. So to my dying day, I will be ever so grateful for that intrepid, invisible little pollywog who braved the competition and made it to the end zone and gave me my life. Talk about a touchdown. Score one for Team DNA, baby. I'm here. Yeah. And still, the years are dashing by now like sticks on a picket fence. Folks ask me, Bill, how old are you? And I can say this, at this moment in time, right now, I'm as old as I've ever been. And alternatively, I'm also as young as I'll ever be. So I'm going to hold on to the second half of that sentence, which is the optimistic side. Some say, maybe, Bill, you're in a middle-age crisis, midlife crisis. And I can say this, I'm sitting here and I'm doing the math, and frankly, I am way past middle life. I think I'm around 3/4 life or maybe 5/8 life, depending on how lucky I'll be. But be that as it may, ooh, look at the wind. It's howling outside my window. The leaves flying off the rubber tree. Wow, I can see it. We're never too far from nature. It's just always there knocking at our door, reminding us of our fragility here on planet Earth. So the wind is howling. It's a cool wind, which means there's no surf. Or what surf there is wrecked. So I won't be going to the ocean. Anyway, where was I actually? Talking about how old I am, and I can say this, I am actually 1 year away from that cool Beatles song, and even though I feel like, in my case, fortunately, that I've been taking out extensions on my adolescence since about, around the age 25. Every year I come up to that booth, I get my little adolescence card stamped, and I come back till the next year. So I just got it stamped, and here I am. And actually now I've finally reached that age where I can date younger women, and they can be old. Other night I was out with this little nifty 50-something, and we're doing a little touchy-feely, little hanky on the panky, and I reached my hand inside her hip-high lace thong, and suddenly her face went white, and she pulled away and said, "I'm saving it." What? I said, "You're what?" And she looked at me and she said, "I'm saving it." And I said, "Well, it isn't going up in value. You ain't earning interest on it. As your friendly advisor, my recommendation would be to sell." But she didn't. So I wrote a poem in praise of ladies lovely. Old scars and new necklines, creased lips and crow's feet. They're getting older, these women I chase. Sliding ever gradually into a fresh bracket of fear. Gravity claws, fertility gnaws, as these ladies lovely lunge into twilight. Decades in the rear view, hopes fading from purview. Their smiles sometimes seem plastered on, piled high with base and rouge, eyelash and perfume. Sleight of hand, magic and misdirection pulls me towards them. Their charms practiced and perfected on paramours and exes, bosses and boyfriends long and gone. And yet, the light fantastic still flickers from their eyes into mine. Hope and happiness, illusion and metaphor soldier me onwards into their dying lap of love. Okay, there you go. Little off-the-cuff poetry. No judgment there, but I got it out of me. So where are we now? This episode, I'm going to forego grabbing the low-hanging fruit offered up by the continuous political drama, which, frankly, we need a break from. If we're not careful, it can consume us, body, brain, and soul. And I'm going to venture back into the weeds, as it were, into the sort of backwoods of obscurity. A few weeks ago, I was very much, and still am actually, inspired modestly by the thrilling reaction I got from my podcast premiere of Hamlet, which is now archived and available for consumption at your convenience on any of the podcast platforms. The first 5 of this year, that represents Hamlet, each episode an act. And I'm now in the prep stage for another podcast premiere, also some 400 years in the making, of Shakespeare's The Tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice. And while Hamlet was a journey into crime, corruption, and cover-up, Othello lives in a different place. Othello lives at the insane intersection of sex and possession and jealousy and soul-consuming romantic love. Othello journeys into that most pernicious corner of the human psyche where a kind of terrible violence and phantasmagoric fury lurk just beneath our so-called civilized selves. Now, the insanity that consumes Othello the general, Othello the individual, the character, is not really, in my view, a defect in his character or some characteristic of his race, nor is it a fault that he alone is in possession of. Nope, no way. It is my thesis that under the right circumstance, with the right prodding, the very same fire that immolates Othello smolders within us all. And that's what gives the play its tragic and awe-inspiring and consuming power. Because truth be told, we all have an OJ button. It just takes the right set of circumstances to find it and press it. Now, a few notes on context of the play, which is very important. It lives in a specific time, in a specific place that gives it meaning. And the narrative of the play lives in 2 major locations. Firstly, it lives in the back alleys and twisted canals of Venice, and then the balance of the narrative on the Mediterranean isle of Cyprus. Venice is a city-state, and Cyprus is a fortified colony which lives on the watery fringe of the Venetian Empire and at the dangerous doorstep of the Ottoman Empire. Venice is a city of shadows, a thriving urbanity where political intrigue and moral decadence rule the day. It is at once both a city and a state whose wealth is sustained not by the traditional Middle Age ways. By that I mean agricultural or mineral wealth or crude manufacturing, but by trade. Trade in silks, trade in spices, trade in art. All of these things made Venice, in its time, amongst the wealthiest and most civilized corners of the earth. Commerce across the sea was the lifeblood through which the wealth of Venice flowed. And the play, set near the end of the Middle Ages and really at the dawn of the Renaissance, the Venice that Othello inhabits is really a proto-capitalist urban enclave. You have merchants and artisans, shareholders, insurance brokers, moneylenders, and bankers. They all reign supreme in Venice. And this collection of moneyed people, this emerging capitalist class, is presided over by a duke and his council of senators. And lacking its own reserve of military manpower, Venice is dependent on foreign mercenaries for the defense of the sea lanes and its far-flung trading outposts. And supreme among all these mercenaries is one general, Othello. He is a grizzled veteran of far-flung battles, daring escapados, and distant sieges. The general that is Othello, he does hold the fair-skinned citizenry of Venice in awe. Othello is foreign. Othello is other. It's kind of interesting how the word other just sits there right inside the name. Othello, other, the other is Othello. And Othello is black. He is birthed and raised in the mysterious nether regions of the continent Africanus. He is judged not so much as a social inferior, which, like the racists in America, but he's judged in Venice more really as an exotic. He is a walking mystery. He is comes from a land of violence and enchantment. And it is Othello who was tasked by the Duke and his senators from Venice with the defense of their wealth and their empire against the Ottoman Turk, those Mohammedan barbarians whose mighty navies and scimitar-wielding soldiers stand at the doorstep of civilized Christendom. So Othello is at once magnificent, and yet, as we venture into his psyche, wildly vulnerable. He is poised in demeanor, rational in his outlook, capable of making excellent decisions under pressure. But just under his proud surface lurk fearsome vulnerabilities. Beneath his calm exterior swarm a snake pit of demons that are revealed and exploited and exposed by the psychological artistry of his most trusted ancient, his most honest key man, that being the one and only Iago. Now, Iago, for his part, is perhaps, I think, the most iconic and indeed mysterious of all the bad boy characters in our literature dramatica, which includes not only plays, but television and film. And every evil genius you've seen in movies, from Hannibal Lecter to any of those, funny Bond villains, all of those characters can look back to Iago as their spiritual ancestor. Iago was the ultimate misogynist, consumed of a hatred for all things feminine. To his mind, sex was no more than a commodity to be bought and sold and traded for, and as such, all women, in his mind, were no more than traders in their own carnality. They were whores. And for Iago, romantic love is a ruse, a joke, an illusion, something for loose-witted poets to sing about and dim-witted fools to suffer for. And as a military man, Iago is consumed by resentment for the social niceties and civilian protocols that animate Venetian society. In modern military terms, Iago is kind of like that ignored non-commissioned officer who's forever passed over in favor of those younger, those fair, and those more politically connected. And these indignities and hatreds, they metastasize inside of Iago's soul and make his revenge more than just getting even, more than just trying to redress long-held grievances, but his hatred, his evil, it actually transcends anything rational, but becomes his art, his prime creation. These plots he lays, these devious designs, they're for him like paintings, like masterpieces that should hang in museums, so that the deconstruction and dissolution of the general Othello becomes his most enduring masterpiece. And the joy he takes in this process, this kind of delicious devilry, really it becomes one of the key pleasures in watching this play. And for me, I have to say, it's one of the key pleasures, if not the key pleasure, in performing the play. And lastly, Othello, not unlike Hamlet, also it's a tragedy of gender. In the world of Venice, Women are bound by custom, law, and tradition to absolute obedience, total fealty to all things masculine. The feminine serves, the masculine takes. The Renaissance maiden is raised from birth to navigate the mood swings and demands of fathers and husbands in a kind of long-suffering silence. And for Desdemona, Othello's incandescent and beautiful bride, she is one such creature. She is bred, to that manner born, and pays for her servility with her life, her honesty, her beauty, her honor, all become hooks by which Iago drags her down and Othello destroys her. And there's only really one character who defies this kind of paternal tyranny in the play, and that's Desdemona's mistress and Iago's wife, Emilia. She alone confronts this evil, this conformity, this paternal devilry, and for confronting it, she pays for it with her life. Anyway, these are sort of the key factors, such as the stuff that animates Shakespeare's other masterpiece, Othello. And I'm going to be digging into it character-wise and director-wise real soon. So stay tuned. I hope that's kind of a provocative preview of what is to come. Once again, when I get into it, I do recommend, if you can, to read it before. And it'll enrich the journey, to be sure, if you're not familiar with the part or the play. A lot of people, when I did Hamlet, the language comes at them and it's somewhat unfamiliar. The metaphors that are, referred to, the language, the poetry is at first a little difficult to grasp. But if you practice, if you hang in there, if you don't get discouraged, if you don't think, geez, I'm stupid, I can't do this, it does begin to reveal itself quite beautifully. There's a reason these plays have lasted across the centuries. And so I invite you to join me either this week or the next. I'll get into it. So that about wraps up this excursion into the backwater of my brain, and hopefully I shed maybe just a little light into yours. Please, if you listen to this, you're invited to rate me. You're invited to write a review on iTunes. It invites those kind of responses. You're invited to share me. You're invited to tell a friend if you indeed enjoyed it. And if you didn't, don't tell a fucking soul. Keep it to yourself. I'm trying to get better and more creative with my little Instagram skills to spread the word here. But if you listen, thanks so much for hanging. I really appreciate it. My need to do this definitely far outweighs anybody's desire to hear me. So I am, as always, indebted to you, the listener. And until next time, adios, goodbye, and adieu.